Good morning. This is Joe with Acappella Podcast. We have two great return guests again, Brian Levy with Manchester Care Homes and Cambridge Caregivers, and then Brian Harmon, who is a fabulous physical therapist. Great guys, great business, leaders in the industry here in DFW, and friends of mine. And we are going to be talking about falls today, the good, bad, and the ugly. No politics, no COVID. We're just talking about falls. So,
elder falls, not
elder
waterfalls.
falls. That's right.
Yes.
Falls and how crucial they are. I want to talk first about statistics. And Brian, will you share with us some statistics you looked up?
So what Medicare and CDC are finding is that there's on average about 3 million ER visits attributed to falls for seniors every year. And the trends are increasing. Now, some of that's because we have more people retiring, more people getting older, but the number of falls being treated in ERs is increasing, and that's also becoming one of the leading causes of deaths. So we're starting to see that creep up as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and just talking about the good, bad, and the ugly. I'm going to start with the ugly. I was a brand new hospice nurse. It was back in '96. And I had a patient. I was so attached to my little patients. I had hospice patients. I had 15 patients. One was a little gentleman, no family. He had a cat named Suki. And what I thought was crazy about this cat, Suki would use the toilet as a litter box.
Wow.
Because he was too sickly to empty the litter box. So she learned, and then he would flush the toilet. And I just thought that was just the greatest cat.
Cool.
So anyway, we became friends. I'd go to the grocery, and I always did go a little above and beyond for my patients. But one day, and we had a great relationship. One day he walked me to the door. I said goodbye. It was a Friday afternoon. He was my last stop on a Friday. And I used to see my patients Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I do team conference on Tuesdays, and Thursday was my paperwork day. Anyway, so I went by to see him on Friday. You doing okay? Do you need anything? He walked me to the door. Go back on Monday, 2.5 days later, and I knock on the door, and he's screaming. He fell right after I left and was on the floor from Friday afternoon until Monday midday when I got there.
Mm.
He didn't have a phone, didn't have a life alert, didn't have family. And look what happened. He wound up moving to a nursing home and passed away shortly after. I wound up getting the cat, which was the good part of the story.
The
potty-trained cat, Suki.
Awesome.
That I changed her name to Sally because I just had a hard time calling a cat Suki. But anyway, the moral of the story was, what could this guy have done? What could I have done as an RN? What could our social worker have done now people have rights.
Yeah.
He wanted to be by himself. Yep. But that's what I want to talk about. That could have been preventable.
Sure.
And so let's talk today about how can we keep our patients fall free.
Right.
There's a fine line between keeping them independent and respecting their desire to be alone or to walk to the bathroom alone and still do standby assistance. And we have lots of clients like that are leave me alone. And so how do we train our caregivers to still be attentive? It's like be within an arm reach. If you can grab the gate belt, be right there, but still let them feel like they're doing it on their own. And it is a fine line. Mm-hmm. But I would say this, we consider every client a fall risk. Whether they put it on the paperwork or not, they're elderly.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, our seniors will not tell their adult children that they've fallen because they don't want to be labeled as no longer independent.
That's right.
So a lot of times people move, and we had one patient that went to a community, and we wound up having caregivers with her around the clock just to adjust to the community. And she had bruises all over her body. And so she did confide in our caregiver that she kept falling, but she didn't want to say anything. So the falls are real, people. We need to wake up, and just that needs to be on your checkoff. Mom, have you taken your medicine?
Yeah.
Mom, are you falling? And so people just assume a fall is you trip on the rug and there you go and life changes. So Brian, as a physical therapist, you're in the home and you're working with people that are recovering from falls. So what are some reasons that people are falling?
It's a great question. Let me start with when we do have falls, I am a big proponent of any sort of a way to call for help. Because we've had clients where we've had the same exact thing, or they became our clients because of it. Numerous people who've had their doors beaten down in the senior living community because nobody can reach them. They've fallen in the middle of the floor. They've been there for 2 days, broken bones, those kind of things. And so absolutely, without question, all of the clients that we work with, we look to get them set up with either a life alert button or a cell phone in the pocket. Like I'm Switzerland. I don't really care what device you want to use, so long as you always have a way to call for help should the unexpected happen. So that's first. When you start looking at causes of falls, though, there's so much that goes into it. So it's much more than just simply loss of balance or loss of strength, which is typically how it kind of gets couched. Mom's starting to having a little bit more difficulty getting up and moving around, and that's why she's having the falls. Well, what are the chronic illnesses that are causing that loss of strength and loss of balance? What are the medications that she's taking? Because I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's research that shows that if you take antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications or even sleeping pills, those things have a much larger increase in fall risk than other medications you take. We talked earlier about, white coat syndrome, and then also the opposite of white coat syndrome. For those of you that don't know what that is, white coat syndrome is when you go see the doctor or the dentist and your blood pressure increases because it's really stressful to have some guy digging in your mouth. The opposite is also true for about 20% of seniors, where instead of the blood pressure going up when they go see their doctor, it actually drops. So the doctor in a clinic sometimes does not have the actual right vital sign to prescribe the right amount of meds. And so you can actually have a wrong medication or wrong dosage of medication, which is causing lower blood pressure, which could be causing falls at home. The other thing we look at is, vision issues. We look at the home environment, Sookie the cat, right? Because that could be causing some falls, right? We've got those things. Obviously, the easy stuff is like throw rugs and that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of other things to look at too, like, how wide are the doorways? Can we get the walker into the bathroom? I recently had a patient who unfortunately had a fall because we didn't get the walker, even though we shrunk it down, moved the wheels to the inside, it still wasn't enough space. There wasn't enough space to fit that walker through. And so he had tried before he got the doorway widened to go in the bathroom, and it unfortunately had a fall. So those kind of environmental things are an issue too. And making sure that they're on the right device. Sometimes like even the couch being too loud, like there's all these things that have to be looked at when you're looking at what's really truly causing the falls in these seniors.
Well,
and Brian touched what you said about technology. There's so much technology, like the Life Alert. In our care homes, we use the pressure pad. So if a resident is even thinking about getting up and they're moving, it'll alert the staff. I have a client who is very active on the private duty side, very active, hunts, fishes, goes out. He fell in his backyard and he was baking in the sun for 6 hours. This is a retired doctor, smart guy, but he fell. And so he really wanted to continue to be independent. So his kids use technology. They got him an iPhone and an iWatch, and he's not allowed to take the watch off.
That's right.
wow.
And so that was the
Do you know
tool.
why? Because it has the new ones have fall detection.
See, now
By the
I
way,
did
I
not
tried
know
this.
that.
Yeah, so my wife got me this for Christmas like last year. So I think it's the 4 series and above.
Above, yeah.
And so I tried to throw myself on the floor. It hurt. But I tried to throw myself on the floor to see if it would actually trigger it, and it does not. It only does it if you've legitimately fallen.
There was
wild.
actually a story in the news not
So
long
who does
ago
it
about a guy.
report to?
You can do it. It calls for me. It
Police.
calls my wife. But you can set it to call anyone you want.
There was a story on the news recently about a guy who was hiking and he fell off a cliff and he was holding on, I guess, by a tree or a rock, and it alerted the authorities and they came and saved him.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. So there's technology out there. Use it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
And I know the Life Alert, Jewish Family Services offers that. You can call Jewish Family Services, and I think it's about $30 a month. If you can't afford the Apple Watch, or it's just you think that would be.
There's something for everybody.
Yeah, there is
Yeah.
something for everybody.
That's why I say I'm Switzerland. I don't really care what device you want to use. So we're going to have something.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. So just let's talk about medicine, just because I'm an RN and, I always look at medicine. But I have seen people, it's so important for family members to go through and check. Don't just ask, Mom, are you taking your medicine? look at that medicine. Sometimes, like my grandmother, I always use my sweet, precious grandmother. She was so active until she was 97. She lived in a community, and on days they had activity, she wouldn't take her Lasix because she didn't want to have to get up and go to the bathroom during the activity.
Right.
So I noticed her pills, and I'm like, grandmother, why is it you have so much Lasix and you only have a week's worth left of A, B, and C?
Yeah.
Oh no, honey. Like, she wouldn't tell me. And so we figured that, we could say, grandmother, are you taking your medicine? Oh yes, honey, I'm taking my medicine. But do a little more digging,
Right.
because they could have an old blood pressure medicine. They get confused with the newer blood pressure medicine.
Yep.
And when they're in with a doctor, they're only in for about 15 minutes. And that is a lot of information to take in. And I've gotten confused on medicine before. Like, I'm supposed to take an antibiotic, start when I get home, and then I think, oh no, I don't have to start till tomorrow,
Right.
So it's just so important to read those labels, work with your loved one, work with your mom or dad. This is to keep you independent. I just want to know what you're taking. I had a patient too that got her pills mixed up. She had an AM box and a PM box, and she was taking the PM meds in the morning, AM, so she was sleeping all day. Well, surprise, surprise, she's taking them at the wrong times, so we were able to correct the problem.
Yeah.
So, that's just one thing with medicine.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the most common side effects of medications, they are GI issues like upset stomach, and then number 2, closely followed by that, is dizziness.
Wow.
Right. And so the more medications you add, a lot of times the more conflicts, not only conflicts, but accumulated side effects that you can have, and dizziness is one of those things. And so, you're exactly right. If the medications aren't taken properly as prescribed, then that also exposes them for risk. So, I always use the example with my senior clients that, when we're dealing with, not me, but when doctors are dealing with, 18 to 20-year-old females, and they're going on birth control for whatever reason, that the birth control pill itself, the packaging, is actually a mini pill dispenser,
Pill box,
right?
yeah.
So you can tell that I remember to take my pill or not. So I always say to them, listen, if we're going to do that for 16 to 20-year-olds who are really pretty sharp because they're younger, then maybe when we're 85 and 90, we should have some sort of a pill dispenser device so we can just verify, did I take my pills today or not? Or family members can.
Right.
So one of the things I do, even though I'm a PT, I go back and I look at all their meds, and I look to see, one, was it dispensed properly? Like, do they match up according to the med list they have, and did they take them? And so you can start to see some pick up on some signs of some issues if you catch those.
Meds is like fall risk. It's I use the analogy: you're a toddler and you're an elder person, and you have the same philosophy. You're going to be standby assistance with a toddler, and you're also going to manage their meds. It's the same with an elder person. You're going to be standby assistance, and you're going to monitor their meds.
So let me ask you, Brian, what do you do? Like, I know I've gone a lot of homes in Dallas are these multi-levels. The den is 3 steps down. That's kind of the Dallas ranch style home. What do you do if somebody is in a home with different levels, but they just insist they want to be home?
Which Brian?
Brian.
Yeah. Actually, Brian has taught me to assess the home and look for all the different fall risks, etc. There are the sunken living rooms, and I recently had an ALS patient with a sunken living room, and the wife was amazing, and she wanted me to do a full analysis, and her handyman was going to put up guardrails, and they renovated. But you've got to learn where are the fall risks, and then educate the families. They never think that rug's a fall risk. It's beautiful. That's a family heirloom, but it's also a fall risk. We had a mutual client recently where we came in and literally rolled up all of the rugs. And they're like, well, that helps us not fall. I'm like, it helps you keep stable, and it's a grip. And no, it's not. It's a fall risk.
So thank you for that. So when you look at how our walking pattern changes as we get older, right? Just watch an older person walk around as they start to lose their balance, lose their strength, whatever. You're going to see 3 common things. One, their feet are going to be wider apart, right? Because we feel like we need a wider base of support. It's like if somebody was going to run at you, you'd spread your feet so you can maintain your balance, right? It's the same thing their brains are doing as we're starting to lose our balance. So their feet are wider. They take shorter steps, so they don't reach their foot out quite as far, because they don't want to spend too much time on the standing leg as they swing this one through. They're trying to shorten that time that they're on one leg, right? And they also keep their shorter steps in terms of lower to the ground. So you got wider steps, shorter steps, and lower steps. And so things like these rugs become tripping hazards. So I like to put them up on the wall. If they're like an heirloom, like, here's your new art. Right?
Exactly. Right. It's still in the house.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's like the toddler. It's a drunken sailor toddler, and it's a drunken sailor senior. You know, it's that unbalanced.
So another thing, okay, and this is where I just, as a nurse, I was not aware, and you've educated me. Somebody falls. They've broken their shoulder. They don't want to stay in the hospital. The surgeon is going to do day surgery outpatient. Can they get physical therapy? Is it up to the family to teach them how to use that extremity properly and not fall? Or how does that work? Because doesn't Medicare allow someone to have that physical therapy in the home after a broken bone and surgery?
Yes. Yeah, they sure do. I think some of the confusion may be with the what they call the 3 midnight rule. And I think that's temporarily been suspended with COVID. But generally speaking, that if you were going to go from a hospital to a skilled nursing facility, you have to have 3 midnights in a hospital. Not the same for a rehab hospital, obviously not the same for home health. But yes, you can get therapy. It just depends on what setting is most appropriate for that particular client.
Okay.
Yeah.
So say somebody falls and breaks their shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
How many weeks of therapy? Now, I know you can't just blanket it all, but say they've got shoulder injury, they are going to have to learn to use it. How many weeks are we looking at for recovery?
Depends on the extent of the injury, depends on the precautions and restrictions after the surgery, like how bad the break is, are there tendon involvement, is there muscle involvement? But as a general rule, what I would say is you're going to have several weeks of rehab in the home following something like that. There are Medicare restrictions in terms of, homebound status and those things, but I'm assuming that this is because of a fall in the home. So they're check the box, they're homebound qualified because they're falling at home. It's probably unsafe for them to go to an outpatient therapy clinic. And so Medicare would cover that for as long as the therapist or the home health company deemed that there was still a skilled necessity to continue to work with that particular client.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would there be exercises every day, or what is usually the plan? I know you go out a couple times a week, but for the private caregiver or the group home owner, like, how do we work together to make sure that client improves?
Yeah, so it depends on the protocol or how extensive the injury is. As a general rule, it's usually 2 to 3 times a week, but I have had plenty of clients where I've done 5 for the first couple weeks.
Wow.
Right, and then kind of peeling back from there. I do a lot with caregiver training, whether it's in assisted living or whether it's private duty, because if I can utilize other humans in the home to help reinforce things that I'm doing while I'm there, then that like home exercise program, that kind of stuff probably doesn't need to be done while I'm there. It probably can be outsourced to somebody else that's there.
But that's where
the more important things can be done while I'm there.
Right, and that's where we team up. Where if Brian's going to see a client 2 days a week and we're going to be there 5 or 7 days a week, we want to be there when he's there. So our caregivers at Cambridge can watch what he's doing and continue that program even when he's not there.
And that's what
that's
we do.
Continuity of care.
Yes, it is. And that's why we're so like-minded is in our agencies is you do have to coordinate that care. And it's so important. I always recognize whatever Medicare is going to pay for or your insurance is going to cover, you don't have to have private duty. Right. Your parents have paid in this money to Medicare and you want to utilize those services.
Yeah.
What about, Brian, too, and I have seen, we talked about this several years ago. I had a patient that a physical therapist came out, literally wiggled this man's toes. I was sitting next to the patient. Patient was bedbound and said, he's doing great. That was his assessment. That was his 45-minute, hour-long visit. And I can bet you that agency charged Medicare that per visit rate. So as a consumer, how do we know our loved one is getting the right care? What are the questions we ask? Mom has fallen. Medicare is going to come out.
Right.
So direct us on what is that adult child? What are we expecting?
Ooh, that's loaded. So I would say this, that it's really important to vet the providers that are going to come in your home. And sometimes you've not had experience with them before. And so, they're all, just from the yellow pages, and you don't really have any experience with them. And so relying on trusted other advisors. So if you got private duty in the home, relying on them to say, hey, who do you recommend, or your physician or whatever, that can go a long way in ensuring some of that. With respect to the therapist that you saw just go in there for 5 minutes and wiggle toes, I sadly, we've seen some similar things, and it drives me nuts because it gives us a bad reputation in the market. I'm a firm believer that as we progress through the 2000s, we're going to see a lot more things transitioning back to home, and so I'm very bullish on the impact that we can have in a home setting, and so those kind of things drive me crazy because that's the opposite of what we should be doing.
That's
because we
right.
should be actually trying to figure out how do we provide more value for family members, more value for the payer sources, more value for the referral sources in treating those people at home, because that's where it's most cost effective that way. So you do find, here's the weird thing about, and you guys see it in private duty too, is there's a weird, it's not weird, it's just, let's face facts. We have a distributed workforce, right? They're not in our office, right? They're not in our clinic. They're not in our hospital. So we have to trust that these people are going to be autonomous and follow procedures, systems, processes, whatever, in clients' homes. And so it does breed the element of, if I want to hide out and I don't want a supervisor or a boss right there with me, then I can tend to gonna try to go hide in home health or hospice or private duty. And so it's up to us, as leaders, to pinpoint who those people are and make sure if we hire them, we remove them very, very quickly from our organization.
Right.
But that's some of the risk of the homebound staff, is because, we don't have a supervisor right there to make sure.
Right. And everybody needs an advocate. And we have, on the private duty side and in our care homes, families that live out of state and even out of country. And so they rely on us to be the eyes and ears and the advocate of their loved ones, whether they're in the care home, in their home, or at a doctor. And so, we go so far as to sometimes just record a doctor visit,
Right.
so we can send it to their loved ones to say, here's exactly what the doctor said. But everybody needs an advocate.
And I think there's some consistency too. If you, for example, so if I'm a family member and I don't really know who I'm supposed to be hiring for home health, PT, me, or nursing or whatever, then, if you're calling the agencies, if you're getting, busy signals or you're having messages and they're not calling back for hours, like if there's a consistency that you find that, hey, they're really like John the on the spot, they're very quick to respond, they're very quick to answer my questions, they seem knowledgeable what they're doing, they're empathetic to the questions and the needs that I have. They're not just trying to sell me on them. Then I think you should find that that's probably a culture that's been set by the leadership, that they're there as a service to you, not just as a, hey, you're a billing event for us. I think you may find that probably pervades the entire industry down to the clinicians. So if you get comfortable with the office staff or the administrator as you're talking to them, or even the salespeople, and you feel like they're an advocate for you, to use your word, or their mindset is one of service, and they're quick to respond, I think that probably would give you a better idea of who you should go with and who maybe you should avoid. Because I have tried to call some of the larger named ones here to help other people that were out of network for me, and it's taken me a day or two to get a call back. And I'm like, we're going through a different one.
Yeah.
Then you build that trust factor, and you build, it's almost like you build your own little referral list, and you get to know people in the industry. I mean, imagine another industry that you know nothing about, whether it's insurance or landscaping. You have to learn the lingo, you have to know the people, you have to know what companies are reputable, you have to do all your research, and you're in crisis mode, and dad's being discharged tomorrow morning.
I know.
What do you do?
Yeah.
So it's a big learning curve.
Well, and I will say, just because I am a nurse and I juggle so many things, I wear a lot of hats, and sometimes, and I love hospice care. It is just I love hospice. But I'll be honest, sometimes my brain is in so many directions. You say, can you give me the names of 2 or 3 agencies you'd recommend? And honestly, I draw a blank and I have to, okay, let me, I mean, when these people are making the decisions and giving these referrals, it could have been a Medicare agency salesman that just dropped off lunch and
Right.
without really doing the homework. And I hate to say that, but that is the reality. So what I say to our staff, and I know, Brian, you have the same philosophy you do too, Brian, pretend like you're in a hospital. And this is what I say. You've got a camera on you at all times, and your supervisor is down the hall. Pretend you
Right.
see those 4 white walls
Right.
like you're in a hospital.
Yeah.
Would you be able to do that if you had a supervisor in the next room? So you have to hire people that go to the home have to be have integrity. They have to be accountable, and that's been a learning thing for me over the last 15 years. Is when you ask somebody a question, are they going? Are they doing? You just want to make sure they're following through.
Right. Right.
Inspect what you expect.
That's right.
You know.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify.
Right.
That's right. And if you have a concern, you know what? Mom has therapy, but she always seems to be late and she doesn't stay very long and I can't understand her. How would you respond to that?
If she was calling me to say the therapist is always late,
Yeah,
we'd probably be letting the therapist go.
right.
If there's a consistency of that, because from my standpoint, like that is we don't do that. I was telling Brian today, like I do things where I'm FaceTime with clients and their family members from home, especially now with COVID. I try to be as empathetic as I can with not just the client that I'm paying, that I'm being paid to treat, but also the family members that are attached to them. And so, I want to make sure.
A family.
Yeah. So
problem.
I make it a point every week to reach out to at least the primary, person who's attached to it, whether it's the daughter or the son. In some cases, I've got 3 kids that I'm texting or sending pictures to or whatever.
Mhm.
The referral sources, the physicians, and also the community. So, service to me is a very, very big thing. You can be the greatest nurse, the greatest therapist, the greatest doctor in the world, but if your bedside manner or if your service delivery is for crap,
Yep.
good luck. It's not you're not going to
Customer service and communication. I mean,
Yeah.
and accountability. I mean, you want your caregiver to care about the person they're caring for like it's their grandmother.
Mhm.
And when they're in the kitchen on the phone looking for another job and they're not happy, it's like the domino effect. So be accountable, be present.
So, okay, what do you do too? And this is, sometimes, you talked about, how many falls result in death,
Mhm.
which is it. So you do say you see a patient that realistically you don't see that they're going to recover from. And maybe the doctor hasn't been quite honest or the surgeon. And that's a reality, so how do you guys address that? Like if you see somebody that is not improving,
It's a good question. Okay, so this is one of those. I love this question. So there's a lot there. So first off, understand that in some cases the one fall can do you in. In other cases, there's a cumulative effect. So we've seen people who have had numerous falls and they've never once hit their head, but there is a weird systemic decline where it tells the brain says, that's it, I'm out. And so you all of a sudden start to see these weird dementia things starting to crop up, and they've never once hit their head. And so you start to see that deleterious effects of those numerous falls. When you get to your point that where there's not much progress to be expected to be made, here's where we pour a lot into caregivers, whether they're in assisted living or they're in private duty, because while my patient may not be able to, and I'm dealing with one right now in the same situation, while my patient might not be able to follow commands or understand how to relearn how to walk with a walker, because if you introduce a new device to them, sometimes it's not as safe as you'd like to be. And so we have to make sure that there are other people there to help kind of fill in those gaps. And so I do a ton of work with the caregivers on my visits with those patients, because ultimately those are who are going to be left in charge of this person's care.
Sure.
And so
Continuity of care.
I can do a few things with them, but I'm still going to go out there and see them for the purpose of training caregivers and making sure that facility staff or private duty caregiver staff are comfortable and safe with them too.
When you talk about a fall, it's not just the fall, it's the trickle down effect
It
of,
is.
okay, now I've fallen, now I'm really nervous to
Right.
continue with my ADLs. because I may fall again. And then when you fall, you have new meds, you have cognitive, impairment, you have social isolation. I mean, it just, it goes all the way down. And so you'll never be the same again. Well, that's not necessarily true, but, there are definite criteria that come into play.
Well, and there's a correlation between balance and confidence, right?
Yeah.
So I can stand here, 6 inches off the ground on a balance beam. Put me out here across the highway, forget it. Like, you could give me one this wide, there's no way I'm going to fall. Right. So as they start to lose their balance and they start to lose their confidence, and now all of a sudden you start to see some really interesting creative solutions that they come up with, to try to manage. You'll love this one.
Story.
Yes. So I had this guy, lovely guy, several years ago, and part of what I do when I go out and see a patient is we work through like everything that they have to go through in the day, right? So whether it's cooking, cleaning, dressing, bathing, getting from the bathroom to the kitchen, whatever the case is. One of those things is also, okay, how are we getting groceries? How are we getting things from the outside to the inside, right? And so this is pre-COVID, obviously. And so this guy was really small. He had this walker that seemed like it was, it's a miniaturized walker, but it's very heavy for him to lift. And so I asked him, well, how do you go about getting groceries? And he says, oh, no big deal. I just take my car and I go out and do this. And I said, how do you get your walker into your car? Because you're pretty weak already. He goes, I got this. And I was like, oh, this I got to see. So we walk out. He's living in an apartment complex. We walk outside. And sure enough, it was like, you've seen, was it like the Twilight movie where he glitters? Like literally these things are glittering off this guy's car as I'm walking out. He has literally installed bathroom grab bars from the trunk up the frame onto the roof. And so he would walk to the trunk,
good for him,
open the trunk door, lift his thing in there, lift his walker in there, and then he would walk himself all the way to the front door. And for him, it worked.
You know what? Use your resources.
That's one of my favorite creative solutions because it actually works for him.
Yes.
When I first saw, like, you got to be kidding me, but it actually worked.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Yeah. That's awesome. What about then, where I'm just going to touch briefly on COVID? I said I wasn't, but somebody is concerned about COVID. They need physical therapy.
Yeah.
Can you do that via telehealth? And how productive is that?
So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I am not a big fan of therapy with telehealth. I think in some cases there's a use for it. So for example, if I've got a patient who's very safe and it's just a matter of advancing a home exercise program, I think in those limited circumstances that probably works. You all both know that when we're dealing with people who are fall risks or they've got significant weakness, they need assistance with transfers or gait training or whatever, there is no way I can do that from a telemedicine visit. Mm-hmm. And so there are things that you cannot replace with technology. And I think having the guidance and the human assistance of a well-trained therapist in your home, that's going to be far better than having a telemedicine visit.
I look at it as just a mitigated risk, excuse me, is the risk of having a therapist into our care home greater than not doing physical therapy or having our staff do the physical therapy in conjunction with a physical therapist. Mm-hmm. And you just got to weigh the pros and cons.
One of the things we did work out with some of our communities is we've actually done, it's a little hot to do it right now, but before it got 100 degrees, we would actually use the outside patio to do visits. So it was a little bit more contained that way. Mm-hmm. The risk was reduced. And then we would spend time training the caregivers on certain things that they could actually do. And so we would limit the frequency of the times that we were there to limit exposure. But when we were there, there were a little bit longer visits because we needed to make sure we trained the caregivers on some things to do while we were in our absence.
As we all have during COVID, you just have to be creative.
You do.
Yeah.
I know. Well, this has been
more
so.
COVID.
So this is kind of. We're going to talk again about COVID, but not today, because I feel like that's all we talk about is COVID. But just a takeaway. I know we're going to be doing a Lunch and Learn series starting in September with Brian, just for family members or private caregivers or caregivers that work for an agency that just need that specific training. It's going to be open. We're going to do it on Zoom, but we'll also do it in person because I think that hands-on demonstrating helps so much. So we're going to give more information on that coming up. We'll put that on our Facebook page too. We're excited about that. And just can I get your information again, Brian?
Sure.
So if anybody has a call or question,
Yep.
Brian is my go-to. If I have a Medicare home health question, it's Brian.
So you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or you can reach me via text or my phone at 321-271-4052.
And Brian Levy, it's always awesome to have you.
Thank you.
We are like-minded in what we do. Cambridge Caregivers and Manchester Care Homes. If you have questions for Brian, what is your number?
214-649-9922.
Thank you guys so much. We do have a Pajamas for Seniors drive coming up for Grandparents' Day. We are collecting for 3 McKinney, Texas low-income nursing homes. So if you want to be a part or get some information or just have a bin collection in your office, give us a call, 214-866-0085. So thank you so much
Thank you.
today. It was great.
It was fun.
I just appreciate your time, and we'll see y'all again soon.
Yep.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.